Welcome to the English Homemaker podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things home, a realistic but fresh view of homemaking from the suburbs of the south of England. I am your host, Alissa Evelyn. Welcome to episode 7 of the English Homemaker. Hello everyone, how are you today? I really hope that your day is going really well, you're getting things ticked off your list, and that you are also making some time for yourself to relax, even if that's just 5 minutes for a cup of tea. I hope that you are taking a little bit of time to nurture yourself, look after yourself, and keep that mind happy and active and yet peaceful. So today's episode is my first interview. I thought I'd break myself in gently by doing an interview with my brother, who is a kind of joint homemaker with his wife over in Sweden. They've lived there for 3 years now. I shall let him explain and introduce himself, but he's got a really unique perspective on life itself, but the home in particular, and I really wanted to capture that, and I think we did a pretty good job. We talk a lot about the philosophical aspects of homemaking, we talk a lot about story and connection, and we just talk a lot about lots of big, deep things. That's kind of who my brother is, and he is a really good, deep thinker. And so I really hope you enjoy this conversation today. Here we go. Hello, brother of mine, and welcome to my podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you. To anyone that is listening today, I am recording this podcast with my brother on my birthday, because what better thing to do than spend some time chatting with my brother about all things homemaking and homesteading. And I am just so excited to speak to you today. So let's start by you telling everyone about who you are, Martin.
Okay, so I am obviously, most importantly, Alissa's brother, elder brother.
Attribute.
Most important thing about me, I am a father of 4. I live in the wilds of Sweden, well, in the middle of a potato sea, next to a small forest and next to a huge mountain, which huge for Sweden, but wide and not very tall. I am endeavoring to live like a Tarzan Womble hobbit. I think that's like the silly version of, and the best description of how we are choosing to live. And Tarzan to represent like the wild within all of us, and that sort of innate connection to nature and sort of the power that represents for us. And Wombles because we are scavenging and trying to build a society on the marginal aspects of the main culture alongside it. So, you know, making good use of the things we find, the things the everyday folks leave behind. For American people, you'll have to Google that. And hobbits, because I think it's the Hobbit where he says, like, it's a difficult thing to live a good life, or it's a wonderful thing to have lived a good life, and that life should be more full of song and food and cheer, and the world would be like a better place. Obviously, those are both terribly murdered quotes, but they are the center of what I guess we're trying to build here. And yeah,
as long as I've known you, you've had you do Hobbit days, don't you? Since forever.
Really regularly, and they have just evolved over time. So initially that would just be watching with the small children the Hobbit movie and eating an inordinate amount of meals in the day. So having breakfast and second breakfast, then doing lunch and then tea. And then usually by that point, even though we always have supper, neither of us can manage supper, so we don't have supper.
Yeah.
Or any of the other sort of 3 meals of the day that the average hobbit eats.
Amazing. And you've lived in Sweden now for
almost 3 years, yeah. As of this September, it'll be 3 years. We moved at the end of the first lockdown to Sweden. We got all of our stuff into the back of a Volvo estate and threw the rest of it into storage, and we drove all the way here with all the things, only what we could fit in the car and on top of the car and in every single space between people, in one load all the way up to Sweden.
You had a kayak on the top of the car, right?
We had a canoe on top of the car, and inside the canoe was all loads of bow blanks, Juliet's guitar, and all sorts of bedding that was just sort of duct taped to the inside, not to sort of hide it, just to fit more things into a small space.
So, and your experience has been positive generally of Sweden, of moving to Sweden? That was a good decision, wasn't it?
We've been really blessed by moving to Sweden. Yeah, I think that in our life we sort of desire freedom. When we talk about our family values, freedom is really high in that. And in Sweden, the landscape and the place that we live gives us a lot of opportunity to live in a more free way with less dependency and more enmeshing in beautiful relationships and enriching ties to place and to each other.
Awesome. There are so many things I could talk about with you when it comes to homemaking and relating it to this podcast, because you are one of the only male homemakers I know. I know a few, and there are some that would call themselves homemakers, but you're probably like the most, I don't want to say intense, that's not right, but you're like most full time.
I'll take intense. Yeah.
You think a lot about things as well, which I really appreciate. You're really creative. And I guess, but that's been for a very long time with you. And so one of the things I want to ask you is sort of what the genesis of that kind of, was there a book that you read? Was there what sparked it off for you, the whole kind of homemaking idea? And would you call yourself a homemaker? I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think so. I think that like me and my wife have been crafting culture, and in that the home is central to our family culture. And as we create the culture together, I have initially grew the cultural home, and as my wife came more alongside our ideals, and as also she was going through a period of mental health trauma, I would should be happy if you can say that, because she's so well now. And as we have sort of developed in this space in our Swedish house, she is becoming the main homemaker, and she keeps the household. She is the center of our oikos, and I now do huge amounts of homemaking within that. But she is the primary homemaker. But until maybe 18 months ago, I would describe myself as the main homemaker, because I set the ideals, I did the cooking or planned the meals, and also sort of set the tone to the house. Not because it was just a role that she was wanting to take up to, but had not been skilled to. And now she is aggressively chasing skill and has such a beautiful heart for it now that I am now just getting in the way sometimes. So yes, I would call myself a homemaker, but I wouldn't call myself now the primary homemaker in our household. And I think that as a man, that's a relief to me, because taking up aspects of that energy can be quite exhausting, and some parts of it can be incredibly enriching. But when you're trying to hold both roles of man in the household and homemaker, it can be like tiring. I don't know if that will resonate with any of your listeners, but if you're trying to do all the jobs, it can be too much. I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. I think definitely that will resonate with lots of people listening. Trying to do all of the jobs of the house is extremely tiring. You could spend your whole time focusing on just one thing and it would still take up all your time. You could spend your whole time cooking, for example, or you could spend your whole time cleaning, or you could spend your whole time organizing and decluttering the house, or laundry takes up just so much of an amount of time. Let's talk a bit about the kind of skills you learned before you went to Sweden and the sort of things you were working on. And like I said, like, was there a book that you read?
The genesis of this. So yeah, that was actually the first question. So I blame my mother entirely, because in my earliest stage, one of the best picture books we had in the house was Sufficiency by Seymour. It was almost always out somewhere and available and very pretty and also special. And so you weren't supposed to mess with it. So therefore you mess with it more as a child. And I think like when I was 8 or 9, me, you and our little brother all were drawing like once or twice a year, like our planned land. And sometimes they would have castles on, but they would always have like some animals and a pond and this, and we would draw them either in the car or when we were in the sitting room, and we'd just be drawing things. And like Johnny's would have more castles on than mine. We both put lakes, and then we got more complex as we got older. But that was always something that was always part of like my culture. And I think for me, I started to, as I grew into being grown up and seeing the real world, and I was in the military, and I started seeing what the world was asking of me and my children and what that story was pushing me toward, I decided that I didn't really like where the main narrative that everyone's following was taking me. And then I started reading a lot more. I was doing forest schools and doing therapy with children outside, and I saw the incredible results that had. At the same time, I was doing bushcraft. And the genesis moment for me, one of the many, probably the main one though, I made fire with sticks. And I don't know what it was about it, but it was this amazing moment where I was just like, I am in the middle of nowhere in this big, beautiful oak woods somewhere in North Wiltshire. I eventually managed to make fire with 2-3 sticks, just spinning a stick round with another stick. And then suddenly, you make fire in the woods. And it was something incredibly primal that woke up in me. And it made me just realize that there was a truth in that there was this incredible, and also barefooting. These two things made me suddenly feel like, oh, there are two main narratives of like, one of like fragility of man and like a lack of wildness within us, or a lack of connection, then how important comfort is. And like something really stupid, like you don't need shoes, was kind of a big deal, because when you strip away things that people say, we have to do that, and you realize, oh, actually, I've got healthier knees and healthier hips and a healthier back because I don't wear shoes all of a sudden. Like 6 months later, I'm like, running faster, feeling better, have had no major hip, back, or knee issues for a minute. And when I realized that some of the narratives that I've been raised with, I had to question them all. And in questioning those all, I decided that I wanted to have more freedom, more connection to nature, and more time with my children as a priority. And it's one of the reasons initially I left the Navy, because I was starting down this path. My persona is not very good at being in the middle of something. So I'm very much not all or nothing, but if I care about something, I care about it with all of myself. And so then I commit a lot of my mental resources, even if I'm still doing the same thing and still continue on a more measured path, my heart will go to something with all of my heart. So then I started reading and informing that, and trying to check that it's not rubbish all the time. Like always reading the opposite of what I was reading at the same time. So like I didn't just like confirm my bias. But I was reading things like Sapiens and Hero with 1,000 Faces and Dark Emu and all these things that we're talking about, like native peoples, history, how history has been revised. I even reread the Bible at the time to go like, what did Jesus actually say? And what is the church saying? And that's also when I chose to leave the church, which is a big deal at the time. And but all of this then led me back to the importance of like food and the home and the family, and really sort of stripping away all the other values the world tries to push on us, and keeps us committed to that story, and in return to something more original and beautiful, which is your family in connection, your household, your home in connection to the broader landscape and community. Obviously went like way off the rails there, but I hope that we got back to answering the question. It's quite a long journey, and I think that when expressing the journey, it's probably best to express as a story, is that I had told myself a story that like one day I would be able to afford the nice homestead that I dreamed of. And then as I got older, I realized like how much of my life would have to be consumed to be able to afford that in England. And then I made different decisions, said, like, okay, what does the homestead represent to me? Or what does the small holding represent to me? And the answer was freedom, food security, like sovereignty. And then I decided, like, okay, what can I do now? And how can I live now to embody that feeling right now? And how can I change the narrative in our home? And what can I do now to do that? So if you go on my Instagram, you can look back to when we were living in like red brick terrace. And it's a very nice red brick terrace, but we were in this tiny concrete garden butchering deer every couple of weeks, because that was the best quality meat and it helped my children connect to their food. And we also processed the whole animal because that was what we could afford. It's what we could do in our area. And then I would get up before work at like 5 o'clock, and I would go out barefoot and go pick blackberries for like 3 hours sometimes before work. And then I would come home from work and I'd take the kids out. We'd go swimming in the river and we would go foraging for herbs, because that's what I could do then. And all those things made me have a taste of freedom, like gave us 1%, 2%, 5% extra freedom in our life. And that freedom, when you start gaining it, is a multiplier. Like when you first taste that sort of level of freedom or joy in your family, it makes you desirous of more. And then it drives you to make harder and harder decisions. And then eventually for us, like that period, which was probably 8 years overall, maybe now 10, got us to getting to Sweden and starting a little, trying to be self-sufficient, and all the excitement and joy that is too. And like all of that revolves around the home and a return to the home and a return to the beauty that a well-crafted and chosen home can be, and also how little home represents place and how much home represents the culture, the story, and the heart of your home, which you carry with you.
Beautifully said. I do feel like, having been in your home now, thankfully 3 years later, that it does have a strong sense of being and of purpose, and it's everything that you choose to do is very intentional, and it tells its own story being in your home, not least because you literally display all your crafts and the things that you do and that you're great at all around your home. And it's quite sort of obvious from stepping in there who you're about, which is wonderful. There's so much handcrafted things. There's everything is natural. It's a beautiful space to be in and outside. And it's obvious that the whole family knows sort of what's going on throughout the course of the day and how the home runs and how it should be running and where everyone's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lovely home to be in. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I think it would be really lovely if you would share with everyone kind of the running of the home through the course of sort of like a day and a week, and how that pertains to kind of, I guess, living in Sweden, although that's quite a big question.
How do you run the home? Okay, so obviously everything is seasonal. So we are because we want to live in connection with the land, that means that you are affected seasonally. So I'll tell you what it looks like now, and then we can talk about winter another time, probably in winter. But it does follow a sort of similar routine, which is at the moment, we get up. I wake up around about 5 in the morning, and about 5:10 after I've had a bleary moment, and generally do something awful, like look at my phone. But actually, I just go on YouTube straight away, to be honest, and watch something interesting that sort of gets my brain buzzing for about 10 minutes. Nothing too deep at that time in the morning. And then I get up and I'll light the spis, which is our wood fire oven for my partner. And then I'll go back to bed, and then I'll sleep for about, well, not sleep, but sort of doze for 15 minutes. Then as I hear the roar of the stove go down, I go through and load another load of firewood into there. And then by 10 minutes after that, the oven is ready. And then my wife wakes up and she goes in and pops the bread in the oven. And then we both go back to sleep for about 15 more minutes before all the children start waking up. And then, we get up and I go and release the chickens. Juliet goes and moves the rabbits from their nighttime hutch, which is more secure, to their daytime run, which is mostly secure. But, if something was particularly predacious, is that even a word? Predatory, they probably could get in there. So we give them somewhere more secure at nighttime. And then we come in. I start making the coffee while my partner cooks an omelette, which we love. We have the exact same breakfast now for 3 years, which is sourdough bread and omelette with whatever's in season in the garden, chucked in there to sort of supplement it, and some homemade cheese, which is generally a fresh cheese that I made on a Tuesday. No, Wednesday now, because I go shopping on a Tuesday. And then we have coffee and breakfast, and at that point we stop. Until that point, we haven't made any decisions about the day. It's really important. And as the coffee starts kicking in and protein and fats will start sitting in our stomach, we go, okay, what are we doing today? And then we'll have a quick look at the weather. We'll look outside most of the time and see which way the wind is blowing, because if it's coming from the west and it's a little bit fresh in the air, it probably is going to rain that day. If it's coming up from the south, it's probably going to get a lot hotter and those sort of things. We also obviously check Met Office, because that's great too, but it's not very accurate. Then we go feed the chickens, and then we'll do what we're doing in the day. Our days generally at the moment are, we've tried to make our lives sort of more about feeding into the home economy. So we spend, at the moment, it's about 2 hours in the day sort of gardening and keeping the garden sort of ticking over. And that's not necessarily all in one chunk. Spend about 2 to 3 hours foraging, and about an hour and a half as a whole family foraging at the moment, because it's cherries and they need pitting, and then going to the dehydrator or to make jam. And Juliet goes early in the morning to go pick out of wild raspberries we have. She goes and picks about between 1 liter and 3 liters every day at the moment. And then we may stop around lunch and we'll do something like do a little bit of craft and have some lunch. And then in the afternoon, if we've done a lot of it, and sometimes in the morning that gets a bit messy, and like the garden takes longer and the foraging takes longer, and we'll go out. So maybe if we got sweaty and gross in the morning, we'll go with the kids and go for a quick swim up the lake. And when I say quick swim, I'll go for a quick swim, and the children will spend ages like splashing around and splashing around. We're going like, we got to go back, got stuff to do, and they'll just not want to, so we don't. Then maybe we'll go and get some wood from there's a place we get the wood up on the mountain. So we go for a nice long walk up the mountain, get a pile of wood, and we'll walk with the kids around, and we'll come back. Then maybe I'll have to do some stuff for like the world economy, and then it's the evening. Somewhere there we'll have like elevenses or fika, which is super important if you want to have like a busy life. You have to have like a really good fatty fika. Usually for us at the moment, that's like a rhubarb and custard tart, or far breton, or egg custard tart, like English classic egg custard tart and pastry are so good. And we have those, and if you have those, we all function very well, and we have to have that every day because we work quite hard and use our bodies and brains really hard for the family. And then it'll get to the evening, and we'll all put the kids to bed. We have quite easy bedtimes. 90% of the time, they just go to bed. It's not a problem. About 7, all the children, including the older one, because they all benefit from having a night's sleep. And then me and Fee do our evening chores, which is like bread or processing the fruit we did from the day. So either I'm running the dehydrator, I'm making some fruit leather, maybe make some jam. Sophia will be making the bread for the next day. We'll have about an hour and a half of sort of falling down time, which is sort of maybe, and that might be a bit generous. Maybe it's more like half an hour, but we always have at least half an hour of evening together. But we are always together doing things cooperatively towards the same story. So it doesn't feel like drudgery and hard work, even though it probably sounds like quite a long list. Because we are connected through the story and the culture that we want to bring into our home, it makes it feel beautiful. And it's only not beautiful when it's sort of like sometimes the world comes in a bit loud. Like I think we all experience, like you can have a beautiful home if the world comes in loudly in like the form of some external pressure. That can be like jarring to the story. But usually if you have a strong story, you can return to it quite well. So yeah, we have a little bit of connection in the evening, see how the world's gone. How was the kids that day? You saw them, I saw them, but we didn't necessarily at the same time. Are they happy? Are they well fed? We need to adjust our diet to make them happier. We will sort of bottle off some wine that we've made, or I'll be doing a cheese quite a few evenings at the moment because it's cheese season for another 2 weeks-ish before the milk starts to get a bit late summery, which is just not as tasty and full of flavor. So I'll start making them Parmesan, and then I just do one a week, and that's easy. So lots of things, but that's the general rhythm of our day. A lot of time spent in the home economy, the economy of the home, which makes me really joyful. But it's also exceptionally hard work physically. Not exceptionally hard work. It's so different to the average person's workload that it sort of can seem from the outside like, oh, wow, you do a lot. And you go, yeah, but we live beautiful and free. And every day we're devoting ourselves to a story of more connection, more relationship, more beauty, more real life.
Absolutely. Even I remember the moment where I decided that in the evening, instead of accepting the idea and story that I was so tired I needed to sit on the sofa and watch TV, that instead of doing so, I would prepare for the following day. I'd check I had the food ready for the following day, that things would be kind of mise en place, but like just ready to go. So in the morning I woke up and it was in a beautiful like mindset. It's incredible the shift you can make in something just so simple as shifting that story and making a choice. And it's funny. I love how you talk about creating your own story and how powerful that is, and how I feel like so many people are not necessarily aware that they're living in a story that they have the power to change, even if it's something as small as saying, actually, I don't have to spend my evenings in the same way I always have done, or I can wake up a bit earlier and get things done, or we have so much power as humans. Even if you've already made many decisions that mean that your life has to be a certain way, there are still options that you do have. And that is incredibly powerful. So is every day with you the same? Is there a curve over the week?
Oh, okay. So we actually, it's one of the things, like as a person who is, I like to like potter through a lot of work. So I can't, but the nature of the amount of work we have to do, if I did it all in like mechanical ways, I would be exhausted in one way or another. So I would just do things a thing. But my wife, as she runs the home, we do things on set days, because then actually, and having that structure has helped us it's just completely necessary when you have any sort of like large garden, small holding. You need to have structure. So I can tell you exactly what we do almost every single day of the week. And I'll run through it roughly now. It's like, so Monday is our rest day, because it works for when Juliet is at school and when she's not. So on Monday, we have a day where we generally do less. So I will maybe I might go and get some cheese, go get some milk from the dairy. We don't put any pressure on that day. We might do a little bit of gardening, but it's not like a day where it's a day where we deliberately rest. And that doesn't always look like rest, but it means that anytime that we could be doing something else, we just don't. On a Tuesday, I cycle to the local town because we have chosen not to use a car. I cycle to the local town and do our shopping, and I come back, and generally in the afternoon, I will make a cheese. I'll have started before I go, and then I'll go and do that. On Wednesday, I'll make our weekly, that's a keeper cheese on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we do laundry, and we go to the dairy to do our weekly fresh cheese, which is different because we use it immediately and is a lot easier. And Thursday, Friday are sort of days where we have more time for craft because we don't have any big things on. So we don't have a lot more time, but maybe the half hour extra that you would do something else in, you instead sort of focus on crafts that add to your connection to nature or add to the home. And sometimes, like last week, the crafting project was improve the rabbits' hutches, because rabbits can jump weirdly high. Who knew? Apparently everybody who's ever had rabbits, but not me. And even though they're really happy and they're content inside their run, they always look outside and go, I bet that dandelion out there tastes better. And they'll go for it with a vicious intensity.
How many rabbits do you have?
Only like 3, but we're about to get another one next week. But we should, by the end of winter, have close at some point to 30 or 40 rabbits at one time. Which would be terrifyingly exciting, because they should all have litters around about October. First load of kits from our new rabbits. And we have, I think, 22 chickens, but soon to be less because all the boys are going to be eaten. And then the weekend, we do dedicate just more of our time to doing things like canoeing with the kids, going for longer walks. They all still have some form of foraging in or similar, but because we don't want them to see like there to be a separation of leisure and the home, because I see them as both. Like when I go foraging with the kids to pick cherries, I do want to come back with a lot of cherries, but on the weekend it's a lot more focused on the kids. So if they eat half the basket, it's not the end of the world. Whereas on the Tuesday, they won't get to eat half the basket. They get taught like, okay, this is the day we're gathering for the home. And then Sunday we do a day where we use no technology at all. None. It's great. And so we live like, I feel like generally happier on those days. We don't have any television on to help with the children. We don't use our phones. We don't use anything electric, except we now have to use the blender to get the chicken's mash ready. So we use that. That's the one thing we use on a Sunday. And then, that's us back in all the way around. Somewhere along the line there, I do laundry. At the moment, it's an alternate day because it depends on the rain. Usually it would be a Monday or a Thursday. I do hand laundry outside. But at the moment, we have to wait till there be enough rainfall that the garden is watered so that then I can use the excess water to do the laundry, because it doesn't take a lot of water, but it takes 120 litres. And our well at the moment only has about 100 to 300 litres a day in 2 loads. So if I use it for laundry, it's not there to water the garden. If I need to water the garden, that's a priority. Yeah.
I have so many other questions for you. What is something you're learning right now in your homemaking in Sweden?
As in terms of a skill set or more ethereal?
Both.
Okay. Practically, I am learning how to relearn culture through doing lots of mistakes. Because I think that we have been very successfully culturally decultured or decoupled from culture. Does that make sense? Like a working way in which our families connect and provide for themselves and connect with other people. We all have such a wonderfully hyper individualized life that we don't even watch the same television shows. We don't have the same standards. We don't have even recipes of our family recipes. We don't have all these things that used to make or hold the family, as it were. When we buy heirloom seeds, they're not from our family. They're someone else's heirloom seeds. And when you think about those sort of things, you're trying to relearn those skills, or what skills to relearn, or how to reculture your home. I'm learning how to learn that. That's what I'm learning at the moment. And in learning that, I'm learning how to utilize and be in relationship with a small space. I'm currently learning about how to remineralize my soil, so my plants grow more delicious and nutritious things, so that my carrots go from low protein carrots to high protein, super nourishing 20% protein carrots. Imagine that.
How are you doing this? What wizardry are you using to remineralize your soil? What have you learned so far? I'd like to know.
So far, I'm reading a annoying book called The Intelligent Gardener. I believe it's Steve Solomon, but it might not be. But it's called The Intelligent Gardener, and it's free on Audible. And he said, this is the most important book that I've got, so it's free. And I think it's free on all Audibles. Anyway, great to listen to. Really, really, really annoying. Because he talks about if it's really simple things, but the wizardry I'm using right now is taking the ideas that he's putting forth and going, how can I do this in an ancestrally appropriate or regionally appropriate way? So he talks a lot about calcium being a carrier. And then I remember Nana and Granddad putting all their eggshells around 1 or 2 beds. And so I have actually managed to keep my white fly down significantly by recalciuming, increasing the calcium in the soil and magnesium in the soil around my cabbages, currently without any additional help from things. So I got a load of seaweed from someone who was going to the beach and said, can you pick up a bag of seaweed? And they did. And we've been putting all the eggshells from our eggs. Oh, not our eggs, from eggs that we utilize at the moment. Our chickens aren't yet laying. And now I have had, I haven't had a successful cabbage, because the wonderful thing about living in a healthy wild environment, or a healthier wild environment, is there are lots of insects. And it seems like most of those insects want to eat my cabbages. And the last 2 years, I've had some very ropey cabbages and not many of those. And this year I have several, and by saying this, I'll probably kill them, healthy cabbages, because of a healthy mineral system where bugs have eaten it and then go, it's too sweet, it's too high in water. And the leaves are so much thicker this year, they are juicy, fat leaves on my cabbages. So hopefully it's the year of cabbages, because I have made the soil minerals higher. Again, sorry, random tangent, but the point being there is that's about, I can't make my landscape bigger to have these huge American family gardens, and then an extra acre for potatoes and 4 acres of grass just to feed those acres with cow poo. But I can make the soil I do have as mineral dense as I can, so the food is so nourishing. Just like when we moved to organic food in the UK, we couldn't afford it if we bought the same amount of food, but because the food was so much more nourishing, we could have half as much food and be as nourished. And that was a game changer for us. And then here, realizing we've got really good food, but if I increase the nutrition even further of the food we're eating, then it will nourish us more and we'll need less. And even just closely, we have like 6 potato farms near us, and they all produce a different quality of potato. And we can eat 3 kilos of one farm's potatoes and go away feeling hungry whilst being stuffed and full. And another place, we can buy 1 kilo. It costs 1.5 times as much as the cheaper, bigger potatoes. And her potatoes are way smaller, but they're so well nourished in the soil. They're an organic farm and they nourish their soil really well. So their potatoes nourish us. So we need 1/3 as much. And we can be full on way less or feel satiated whilst not even having to be like stuffed full. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess that's it. It's like it's trying to find those ways to overcome the issues that we have. Because I think that we all think, especially if you've read John Seymour, all these different things like, how can we, you just see problems, then you just don't do it. Instead of, because we have the story right, our story of being freedom and going like, okay, we can't afford more land, but what can I do? I can make the land work for us more. So looking at like old school French gardening models and going like, oh, in Belgium and France, where they moved from like big to they obviously peasants got smaller and smaller land as they inherited, because that's one of the biggest problems, land division. But what they all end up with when they have divided the land down to as smallest possible thing is a large garden with rabbits recycling every single thing that comes out of there, bees and chickens. And now we have all those things. And we are starting to have like a working, beautiful system that emulates late stage peasantry. Requires quite a bit of work, but all the work is beautiful and relational and everything feeds our family. So even when I'm doing weeding, which sucks, I'm not weeding anymore. I'm getting rabbit food, or I'm getting chicken food, or I'm building compost. So that makes it suddenly something I used to hate with a fiery passion, because all it was doing is just pull out the ground, take something that's taking minerals from my ground and throwing it somewhere else because I don't want it in the garden. But now I recycle it through the chickens, through the rabbits, into usable fertility, or into meat, or into eggs. And that's fantastic.
That's so cool. Yeah, it all works together.
Yeah. But separating that from like things that aren't achievable, because I also used to hear people do this sort of stuff and go, oh, I can't do that. It's so annoying. I wish I had even half an acre that was usable, and we have access to a huge amount of landscape around us, so that we can get loads of fruit from and like healthy meat from and all sorts of things, and farmer relationships. In the UK, we did the same thing when we were living in the middle of a city. And it's the same idea as build a system around yourself, that what's the best quality and cheapest protein that I can build my home economy around? And then how can I utilize that in different ways? Like when we first got here, that was just milk for us. We didn't have good connections, but we had a great connection with the dairy. And so I then learned the craft of making everything I could with that milk, because that was the cheapest, best available fat and protein for us at that time. And then as we've grown, we've got relationships. That means we can get things like bison liver and make awesome pate. And we can, we have farmer friends who occasionally will shoot a pig and give us a bit of it. Wild boar, sorry. And we now have obviously our own animals. But like those things were so out of reach for us in the UK that it felt impossible until we changed the narrative to what can we do? What can we do to make ourselves feel like we're building our home economy? And a lot of time, like the skills are really important, because the liberty, the concept of the skill gives you and the output of the skill gives you is great. Even if that's something like simple and beautiful, like winemaking or canning or anything that makes your life more real, or just splitting your own firewood, even if you buy the rounds in, but splitting it yourself, those little things that make your life more real and feed into the story you want your life to be. That's like so amazingly beautiful and inspiring. I'm trying not to swear, but I would swear because I care that much about that thing. The not being watching other people's homestead and life pornography looking at going, wow, it's amazing, I love it, and making yourself feel good by watching it, and then not utilizing that to feed your own home. Does that make sense?
It's good to, like you said, you start the day with a little bit of YouTube.
Yeah.
To get that fire going, to inspire the rest of your life. 10 minutes in the morning, great. But then most people spend 4 hours doing it rather than the other way around.
Oh, yeah.
Spend 10 minutes watching YouTube, feed your mind a little bit, inspire yourself, give yourself the energy, and then go out and make jam, forage, make your own medicine.
Yeah.
Go make spoons, make rag rugs.
Yeah.
Do something.
Yes.
I get so much of the time, and I expect, I don't know, do you get this question a lot? I get a lot of, wow, you're so talented. Oh, you know so many things. And I just, so forever, I'm calling my videos, or when I write posts, I always use the word average. I'm just a really normal person. There's nothing special about the things that I am able to do. I'm not extremely gifted at any particular thing. I just have my hands in a lot of pies, and I like making pie. So, I just enjoy learning new skills. And it's just that I dedicate time to doing it. And I know you, as you already have said, you're very dedicated to what you do. You really put a lot of intention in it and time. And you're way more skilled at crafts than me. But I think also we've chosen slightly different crafts, so that's helpful. But I'm guessing you get that question a lot.
I think that people love to give themselves to other people so they can't do those things. And I think there is like an innate passion required for life. And I think a lot of people have really sadly had that beaten out of them as kids. And I think that people then have to accept so many horrors and abuses from the current world. And I think that you can dress them up in different names, but I think that's what they are. Like, they're abuses and horrors of the modern story that force them into forms of drudgery and slavery, that then they have to wrap so much story around their lives to keep themselves safe. And I've been there, so I know like what I mean. You have to tell stories to yourself, you have to tell stories to your partner, you have to tell stories about, well, I can't do that and I can't do this. Oh, I can't afford this and I can't do that. And instead of going like, and I think for me, it took for us, like, and especially for my partner, it took so much like tragedy in our lives to have her Genesis moment that I almost wouldn't wish joy and freedom to everybody, because I know how much breaking patterns and stories can cause so much pain to people. Like, I almost, when people go, I wish everyone would wake up to whatever it is their idea of the better world is. And I go, I think you don't understand that the amount of pain that you have to go through to break old story, that you have to go through to become self-aware, that you have to go through to restore your life. It's not like something you can do on a worksheet, because you have to engage with your heart and soul. And it genuinely makes, like, I'm even saying now, like, genuinely thinking about, I'm going to cry, because there's so many people out there whose lives just, they really believe the story that they're average and not this beautiful, wild, gorgeous human who's unique and intense, and they have so much to bring to the world, and they've been crushed by a parent or a co-worker or someone at school, or just the system of schooling that just drove them down. Oh man, sorry. And that part of them got crushed. And the fact they can ask that question and they don't see how amazing they are in their own, just being a wild, beautiful human animal with the capacity to think differently to every other human and live a life that is so wonderful in this world, that they bring more beauty into the world just by being themselves. And that people don't know that, and they can't bring that to their children, or that they pass on their pain and their slavery to their children because they won't engage with that. Oh my, that's so sad. Anyway, I'm going to stop crying.
Well, it leads exactly into, and I love that you are completely in touch with your emotions, as it should be. That actually points on exactly one of the questions I wanted to ask, or it leads into it, which was, if someone has just an inkling that they are aware that they're in a story, but they don't know the steps to get out or even question or what practical steps to take. What would you say? What would be your steps? I
wrote a note that I copied and pasted to everybody when I used to get, when I was more on Instagram in early days with Instagram, was more community-y. I get questions like that 4 times a week, or if I did a story, every single time I post a story. I can't do this, you're this, and this. I'd be like, you have to do the following. Right now, go outside, take off your shoes, stand on something wild, even if it's a hyper-curated lawn. Put your hands on your belly, and hopefully there's some fresh air around, but close your eyes, put your hands on your belly, take a deep breath in, release that breath, and just know that you are as wild and strong and as beautiful as me. The earth that you feel underneath your feet grew you and will sustain you if you step into relationship with it. You are off the mountain now, and you just think you're at the bottom. Everything that you need is within you. Everyone has been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. There is a lineage of people there that will hold you if you step into it, and you are not alone. And then if that doesn't work, guess what? Do it again the next day. And do it again the next day until part of you believes it, even a little bit. Plus, if nothing else, it feels nice to be barefoot on grass, right? So no one loses.
That's very, very, very true. That's a brilliant answer.
So yeah, that's what I say to people. There's you can go deeper than that, but I think until you can accept a truth of your own wildness and beauty and sort of start breathing in some passion, start kindling that in yourself, you're not going to get there. And I can't, I don't think you can prescribe that to people, because they have to first accept that part of them is enslaved perhaps to another narrative or to a lifestyle that they haven't chosen, that maybe their parents chose, maybe society chose for them, maybe circumstance chose for them. And that the road to freedom of whatever way you choose to see that, whatever freedom or joy is for you, is it's hard, but it's the only thing that's worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
And anything that isn't that, you're just doing someone else's story. You're living someone, and that's not an egoic way. That's just, you will be enslaved to somebody, and especially through marketing, which is something that I was doing quite a lot of. I know how much people are being told stories of their lack of fear, and they embody those because that is what they're getting told from every angle all the time.
Yes, 100%. Do you feel like that's worse for women than for men?
We were talking about this week. I feel like if you want to change a culture, you capture the women. It's always the way, right? If you can convince women that they are something, it's very easy to then make their men follow, because men will do what they think is best to get women because of biology. There's probably, right? So if the women say the culture is, I need you to have this type of job, guess what? The men will prioritize to be an attractive mate, right? It's just biology to some degree. And so when you see, I think that women have had the harshest disservice because they are innately, in all other animals, a community being that defines themselves in a group. When you look at female biology, and read a lot of anthropological texts and just in my own personal sort of research over the last 10 years, and I read a lot, not that makes a big difference, but you see a commonality of female expression, which is in community, doing things together and define themselves about their place in the group. When you remove women from that, it is innately damaging to their psyche and their biology and ultimately their physical expression. Why are more women now sick in some format than ever before? Because they've moved so far away from being culture makers together in female groups and towards that. And having daughters is something that I cared about so much. As soon as they were born, I was like, oh my goodness, I start to understand patriarchy. And then I realized it's not patriarchy. It's just a physical, a fiscal necessity of the current culture. Right? It might be patriarchy too that uses that as a tool, but you see how much your girls are going towards this cliff of you're going to become a woman and the world is going to come against you so hard. Everything you are is under attack and has been since forever, not just because of this new, whatever women thing that the culture is going through right now, but since forever, like whatever the main thing that defines womanhood or femininity has been on attack. And first thing was to try and separate you from other women, or give you no time to do that, or make your life so comfortable and convenient you don't need anyone, and make that lie true. And that's like that wonderful, like the biggest trick the devil ever pulled is making the world believe he didn't exist. But that is really true. Like saying like, oh no, I just gave you all these really cool things, but then you don't need to go and do this with other women. You don't need to be in community anymore. You don't need that inconvenience, because it is, you know, like being with other people is harder, but also it's so much easier if you relinquish that and be there. And that's like part of femininity. Men can live like some degree lone wolves, because like hunting in small groups is kind of what we've done for forever and ever and ever. But forcing that masculine energy on women is just net destructive. And I see it in my daughters now. She's stepping into womanhood and seeing her struggle with like, I don't want to do that, but I don't know, there's not a space for me to do what I feel like want to be doing. There's no space for it. And if the culture doesn't create a space, that's the saddest thing. And I think that, yeah, you just have to look at statistics and see, are more women sick and sad? Yes, than they were before. Yes. Has it got, as we've moved towards more and more comfort and convenience and less community as a culture, has it got worse and worse and worse? Yes. It's not conspiracy theory or nonsense. It's just maths, and it's not hard maths. Census information. You can look at like medical data on autoimmune and look who the general people are that are having that. The increase in that in women who are like child rearing ages, childbearing ages. It's really sad. I'm going to cry again if you're not careful. It's just really sad. I feel so, as a father, I just feel like, oh, I just want to fix that. But trying to fix like giant cultural shifts is really hard. And I think that as a man, the thing I can do is see it, acknowledge it, and try to not be part of that, and give the best I can to help my partner and my daughters be in like a space where they feel inspired. And also, I think the hardest bit was like, and this is going to sound horrible, but when my daughter grew up, said like, do you know any women that you look at and you find that, you know, she talked about who do you find inspiring? She banged out like 4 men. And it's not because like you're not amazing. They love all the women in their life, but they've seen lots of like sad or confused or angry or tired women, and very few like women that were just like joyful. And then this was like a long time ago now, right? Things could have changed. I haven't talked to her about it for a while because it made me so sad when we talked about it. And this was like when she was like maybe 9. And she just said like, I just think that ladies just seem more sad. And I don't see a lot of them really, really happy, Daddy, right? And we had that conversation like 2 or 3 times in that same week. So I wanted to understand whether she understood what she was saying. She's quite a smart 9-year-old, and she's now a very smart 12-year-old. But it was just really like elucidating to me of like what has been stolen from women, and that has been done through the lens of the home. And why I love what you're doing with this place is that you are helping people reclaim the home and therefore their womanhood, and also the home can become a birthplace of community, because when the home has excess, community comes naturally from that excess. Like if you build a home that feels sufficient in its soul, even if it's not like growing any vegetables, then you will naturally give that excess to the community around you. You'll have people more over for dinner. You'll create a place where people feel loved, and people then come to you because it's a loving, safe space. And that builds community, and that rebuilds femininity, maybe, and the whole of the culture, including masculinity.
Well,
so that's probably way too deep.
No, not way too deep at all. I love that. I love that you appreciate podcasters for. I feel very passionate about bringing homemaking back to being a positive space for people, because the home has been so killed through marketing of convenience, through marketing of you have to be stressed, everything has to be perfectly clean, like all of these lies that we're told. You literally can't do it all, but everyone is trying their hardest to do it all and getting so exhausted and stressed from that. I just want so desperately for people to find the joy in it again and be happy in it. I think one thing everyone's going to want to know is the differences you see in UK culture versus Swedish culture as it pertains to the home, not necessarily homemaking, but home. Because when I was looking at statistics, I found that there are more ladies at work in Sweden in regular jobs. But I wonder if that affects the way that I don't know. You tell me.
Okay, so the good thing about Sweden is that most people can buy their home.
Yes.
And if they don't buy their home, they have access to a home. And that changes everything. Most people we know rent in some format or on a mortgage. And a lot of people own their home fully at like mid-30s.
That is massive.
Right. That's a huge, huge difference. Also, they have a more work-life balance is better. So even though a lot of women work, most of them are still dropping off and picking up their kids from school. And if they're not, that's supported quite heavily by the culture, but also the way they run their holidays is completely different. So the family is very important here, and because of the amount of space and wilds or nature, well, not even nature space, just like outdoor space that most people have, they do that. We still have the same problems here, like a lot of kids who are like addicted to screens, but those addicted to screen kids still spend a significant portion of holidays by the lake, at the sea, in the woods, doing things. Even if that's whizzing around on a quad bike, they're still whizzing around on a quad bike, or they can go do horse riding and those things. I see that the homes here, like they're also only 1 or 2 generations removed from the land, most people. So most people's uncle, father, grandfather owned a farm of some scale. In the last week, met 3 new people. One of them was like, oh yeah, I used to butcher pigs all the time with my grandfather every September until I was 16. Every year we'd all as a family go butcher the pigs for the winter. And we'd all take pigs home. It was just for the family, but we always had pigs. Or the other person, she's only like 32, and she said, oh, when I was a kid, we had to cut the grass with scythes. And we had sheep. And you were like, oh, of course. And so everyone has some memory of being connected to land, even if that's, I went with my grandma to pick blueberries somewhere. So there's that helps inform the home. And I think of all the homes, especially in the rural areas, everyone has a small-ish garden. Everyone has kind of immaculate houses, though, with very few exceptions. But again, because of the size, the way they're built, lots of laminate flooring, and the way they utilize the outdoor space more, there's less time spent in the home inside. So I think it puts less pressure on it. And because they can own the place, they can curate their space easier. So yeah, it's interesting because obviously Swedish people are also very private.
Yes.
In a positive and negative way. So that then you don't get to know exactly what's going on behind closed doors. And it's also something that you're very open in so many ways in Sweden, very closed about aspects of home. Also, Swedish people do put like a lot of family stuff on the walls and their creativity on the walls. That's very, very Swedish. So like if you see a painting of a Swedish person's house, it's much more likely to be something their grandfather did or they did or their aunt did or something like that than it is something they bought at a shop.
Still on farmer's wall is that beautiful what her dad did.
And that's really common in Sweden. They have very uncluttered homes as well. Like our home is very irregular in Sweden with a few other people, but they have because they have space and light is very important because it gets so dark here in the winter that anything sort of reduces the capacity for light to penetrate the room, they generally reduce. So like the IKEA dream is kind of like how most Swedish people's houses are, very sort of simple, but then very busy walls. Like it's very much like the Swedish style is like it's very much 1 or 2 colors, monotone colors, then with very heavy accents, right? So you'll have like, I wear navy blue, but my personality is this incredibly red headband, or that's how Swedish women dress, right? A lot of the time. But the home is very much like that too. Is like simple, usable, functional, open space with heavy accents of deep personality of like, this is me. Look at my amazing painting. No, don't say it though. It's just there in that way. Because Swedish people are also everybody is equal in their mindset. And because of that, they show their special stuff, but they would never go, look at this cool thing I do. So like, even if they are incredible at growing vegetables, they won't be like, unless you ask them, they won't show you around their vegetable garden at all. That'd be super weird. even if, we keep these and we're both incredible artists, they would never tell you. You'd have to go like, oh, who did that painting? And you do that. And you go, oh, you did that. That's amazing.
Yes.
And again, like, so those things like being able to own your own home, the sort of spacious nature, the light, and the way that people in Sweden live and express themselves is very expressed in their home. And I really like that. And comparatively to English homes, like, I think it's not a performative space. Even the cleanliness is performative in Sweden, perhaps, but it's not a place that you're showing other people. It's a place that's very much for you, because for about 6 months a year, it's so cold that it's just you in your house. So it has to work for you and it has to work for light. So it's not like England. When someone comes, they can't see this. I felt in England anyway. In Sweden, it's just like, we like this table, so we bought this table. Do you know what I mean? And there's no, what will the neighbors think in there?
Yeah.
Unless it's just we generally all have a very clean, open space, simple-ish home, with private spaces and walls being very full of personality.
People tend to meet out for coffee rather than inviting people round for coffee, or meet out.
It depends. It depends. So, like, I think we've been around for fika. We haven't someone around for fika this afternoon. We have people around for fika through the summer. Okay. Oh, what you're thinking here is one thing that's wrong. Swedish people are two different people. They're all bipolar, right? In winter, you see people for fika, but you don't go and see people. But in the summer, everyone in Sweden is gregarious. They come around for fika when they fancy. They're all free. They're all on holiday for about 5 weeks of the summer. And they're like out there in the world, like meeting people, going for fika. So in the summer, people come around your house for fika and it's super normal. Have it in the garden and you'll have a lovely time. And in winter, maybe you would have it planned. And then maybe you would meet out and have fika if you're meeting someone that's not a couple friend. But if it's a couple friend, you probably wouldn't meet out fika unless you were older and it was a Wednesday and it was a market day. Then you would definitely meet. And then you don't, if you are not over the age of 55, you don't want to go to a conditori on a Wednesday in Sweden, in my experience. Is it Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday.
That was very interesting. And we're going to have to wrap this conversation up for today, but will you come back on the podcast for another episode?
Anytime you want me to.
Thank you so much for this conversation and for sharing things that you know and sharing your experience and sharing your emotions and just generally being excellent.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you. I am now going to go and frantically weed my garden because someone with a far better garden than me is coming around. That's the very English side of me, which would not be seen as very Swedish.
Will they judge you?
No, they really wouldn't. Not at all. It is just my English sensibility going, everyone will judge me because in England, they would be.
Judge you. Yeah, they would. They would.
Because I know. You know why I know? Because I would.
Really? Oh, I don't know.
I wouldn't consciously, but like that part of our grandmother in me would just be speaking away in my ear and I won't be able to turn it off. I wouldn't hold that in my heart, but it would still be going on inside my ear. The little voice of my grandmother going, you really should eat. We did those a bit more. Oh man, their garden isn't quite as nice as mine. No, I'm doing okay. See, because in England, it's a lot more about comparison because there's too many people in too small a space.
That's very true. That's super duper true.
Anyway, we probably should finish on the goodbye. But if we didn't, it was lush talking to you.
Thank you very much. And we'll chat again soon.
Bye.
So there you go, my podcast with my brother. What did you think? I hope that you really liked that. I know for most of you that's going to be a bit of a thinker, something that you are thinking about over the coming days and weeks and maybe even months, and just trying to work out if there's anything in your life that you need to reframe, where you need to tell yourself a different story, where you actually have more energy and ability and capability than you have let yourself believe. And that is a big one. I think COVID was the start of that for so many of us, and I think it's good to continually be reminded because we can fall into some funky habits. I know that's the case for me. So if you did enjoy today's podcast, I'd love if you would do one of three things. You could do all three if you're feeling cool, but first thing is I'd love if you would head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. You can do that on an online browser on a desktop, or you can do it on your phone. And that just helps other people discover the podcast, and that really helps me know that you're enjoying it. The second thing is if you head on over to Instagram and follow me at The English Homemaker, drop me a DM or leave me a comment, let me know that you're there, where you are, which episodes you've been enjoying. That would be so lovely. I'd love to build this community more over there. And the third thing would be just simply when you see somebody in real life this week, I would love if you would chat about the podcast, tell them about it, whether that's a friend, a sister, someone at the school gate, your mum, anybody that you run into. And if something's been going over in your mind, tell them about it, have a little chat and tell them what you think. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure doing this episode and I hope you really, really enjoyed it. Have a really great rest of your day. Bye.